Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy. This has been a strange year in many ways, but a good year for us in the ILO, because this is the 100th celebration here for the cooperative unit within the International Labour Organization. So welcome to all of you to the virtual event on SSE Momentum, Finance for Inclusion and the Future of Work in the time of COVID-19. I'm signing in today from Cape Town, where in my home country, rather than a cold and I understand going to be snowy Geneva. This is the 5th and last webinar this year to celebrate the Co-op 100 years. We had an event on the 16th and 17th of November, where we had an international symposium on cooperatives and the wider SSE in advancing social justice, decent work, and the sustainable development agenda. We had over 1,000 people streaming in with us there. And today we're going to have panelists and we're going to have 2 main presenters, and then followed by 3 shorter presentations and interventions. And then there will be time for questions and answers. You know, in 2018-29, the ILO had 2 very large-scale projects, research projects in 15 countries and across 4 continents. The one was on the SSE and social finance, the future of work, and there we were partnered with HIVA and HIVA and the government of France. And the second one was on financial mechanisms for innovative social and solidarity ecosystems, where we worked with EURIXE and the government of Luxembourg. I think that the work that we've done thus far has been groundbreaking, and it's going to be a good discussion today as we go forward. This year has been a difficult year, and in the ILO we've predicted there's going to be a loss of the equivalent of 595 million jobs as a result of COVID. There's a lot of uncertainty, and this is where the social and solidarity economy plays a very key role as we go forward. We're a key actor. We promote the access to basic rights. We generate innovative solutions, support a just transition, and acting as an anti-cyclical antidote, given the resilience of some of its entities in this time of crisis. If we look at the panel and what we're going to discuss today, we're going to look at the key challenges of the future of work, the local communities and their roles, how they've been affected, other SSE organizations, what are they doing, and to highlight some of the key elements of the SSE ecosystems with a focus on financial mechanisms that can enable SSE organizations to thrive, to the main trends, and looking at the drivers of growth. So it is great pleasure and honor now to introduce our first 2 speakers, our keynote speakers. The first one is Ignace Paulet, the senior expert of HIVA, KRU in Leuven, and he'll be followed by Riccardo Bodini, the director of EURIXE. So without any further ado, and thank you for all of you for joining us, I'm going to hand over to Ignace Paulet to give us his presentation. The floor is yours.
Okay. All right, thank you, Vic van Vuren, for passing me the floor. Dear friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in 2017, the ILO has asked my institute, HIVA, which is a part of University of Leuven, to carry out a study about the role and the significance of social and solidarity economy, or SSE, for the future of work and employment. And more precisely, we were asked to draw a picture the global macro trends and the challenges coming from them in the near future affecting work and employment. Also to look what the significance is of social economy for work and employment and bring about some down from the ground evidence for it. And third, to assess what the contribution of social economy would be in answering the challenges laying ahead if we extrapolate those global macro trends. These, of course, are very big research questions for a very small team consisting of just 2 main researchers. That's my colleague Benedict Fontenot, which is our social economy expert and currently, unfortunately, in sick leave, and myself as the second in command. Anyhow, these 3 questions make up the structure of this presentation, so let's head on with them. The macro trends are grouped in 4 sections, which we'll run through quickly: economic, technological, environmental, and demographic. Economically, we live, whether we like it or not, very much in the age of globalization, with as an important characteristic the hollowing out of the local roots of economic activities, whether those roots are expressed in capital, in labor force, or in land. The increased volatility of markets and investments has led to an equally increased volatility of employment at locations which used to be labor intensive, and has also led to a polarization of the labor market, with at one end high qualified job nomads, and at the other end an ever expanding group of working poor, insecure jobs, zero-hour contracts, and structural unemployment. Then we could easily spend the whole workshop to technological changes, of course, and the way they affect the world of work. Let's just point out the ongoing automatization of production, distribution, and consumption, and the online platforms, the do-it-yourself apps, and the Internet of Things, bringing this within the reach of all stakeholders involved. All these have the effect of replacing certain jobs in the physical world and creating new jobs in the digital world. However, in lower numbers maybe, and often under less attractive circumstances, whereby employees are gradually substituted by freelance workers who are pushed to be available day and night every day of the week, the so-called 24/7 economy. Environmental changes make us think of climate change, loss of biodiversity, and all the disasters that come from it. But in more positive terms, you may also think of new economic sectors coming up, such as the circular economy, waste management, biological farming, and the conversion to renewable energy, leading at their turn to new opportunities for employment and jobs. However, the negative impact on employment is huge as well. Just one example is the desertification and the degradation of land, leading to an agricultural system more and more in jeopardy, with unskilled land workers forced to leave their rural location and to join the millions of unemployed or underemployed masses in the cities. And this brings us to the important demographic changes we are facing. First of all, the population growth at large. We are 7.8 billion now, more or less, and we will reach the 10 billion mark more or less in 2055. And this growth is unequal, however, as we see in the West, a population that is more and more aging and tends to shrink in absolute numbers, while at the same time, we have exploding growth figures in Africa and the Middle East and in South Asia. So in combination with environmental, economic, and security challenges, this has led to massive migration with important consequences for employment, such as severe brain drain in lower income regions, surplus labor supply in high income regions, the emerging also of migrants as new underclasses, which are totally out of the scope of social dialogue, and also a growing imbalance between the formerly active and the formerly inactive populations. Yeah, so these are in a very, very small nutshell a lot of challenges to deal with, and the question is to which extent social economy can contribute to this. First of all, how do we understand this denominator of social and solidarity economy? Sometimes I say social and solidarity economy. When I want to go a bit quicker, I say social economy. So never mind that. I think no offense. But in a sort of an operational definition, we could just say it contains cooperatives, social enterprises, mutual benefit societies, and similar setups, all with a specific goal of producing goods and services while pursuing both economic and social aims. Their role, that maybe is more clear to put them, their role is to fill the economic gap between the state and the private sector, cater for needs of particular groups, to feature values like reciprocity, well-being, and community awareness. and also in some cases to pilot alternative mechanisms of value creation. That's just to say where we are with this social solidarity economy. Now, to take a closer look at the contribution of social economy for work and employment, we have conceived our study as a series of case studies, actually. There were 12 in total, which were carried out by local researchers in Argentina, Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Morocco, Senegal, Korea, and the Philippines. To give you some idea, to give you some picture, we will briefly point at some of them, not all of them. We don't have the time for that. You can, of course, read their full-length descriptions in the booklet of the study, which you can download from the ILO website. Among our cases, we have the typical users cooperatives, which are often situated in the agriculture sector. The Payoga Kapatagam multipurpose cooperative in the Philippines started as an NGO in the late 1980s and now has 3,000 members, living off the large-scale production and sale of organic fertilizer and also of livestock dispersal. This cooperative organizes the marketing and offers microfinance and training to its members. In Senegal, we have the Cooperative Federation of Horticulturalists, which has its members all over the country, and support them especially for the marketing. This has created and contained about 10,000 jobs all over the country and helped Senegal to reduce import of fruits, vegetables, flowers, and plants. So has had a great impact. Other than user cooperatives, we also had a few cases of worker cooperatives, such as the tea and infusion factory COOP EI in France, where workers took over the ownership through a buyout after a delocalization move by the former management. The employment impact may be small in terms of numbers, about 50 workers or so, but has a symbolic value due to the participatory form of government, even when it seems that marketing and financial management are still challenges where the workers are struggling with. They are still standing until this very day. A bit comparable in Argentina, we have the Red Grafica cooperative, which is actually a secondary cooperative, grouping 18 member basic cooperatives, which are printing factories, bought out as well by the workers. They are known so-called as empresas recuperadas. This RED or network basically handles the joint supplying and marketing for their members. If we link in Argentina all sectors combined, so not just this printing group, the recuperadas employ in total 50,000 workers, so quite a bit of people. We have, apart from cooperatives, also social enterprises. One is the Business Club in the Netherlands. It is an initiative that targets the young so-called needs, the not in employment or education or training, with the idea of launching them into entrepreneurship through intensive training and one-to-one mentoring. This has led during the first 6 years to about 1,000 jobs for a group that is at all not easily employable. Interestingly, this project is financed by social impact bonds. This is a system, I won't go into detail of that. This will be explained to some extent by our next speaker. In another example, the Korean government program accompanies private initiatives to make them count as social enterprises on the condition that they employ 1/3 of their workforce from North Korean refugees. So it's very targeted on this group. And that's what social enterprises are strong in. They target a certain group and they lead them into jobs and employment. This program, this Korean program was set up modestly, but it has had a sustainable impact, both in terms of employment. It has given a stable employment to more than 500 people, mostly women, and also in terms of enterprises, social enterprises still active after the governmental support had ended. So these were just a few examples. Overall, what are the lessons we can learn from these and the 6 other cases, and also some secondary literature we have browsed through? What can we learn about the significance of social economy for work and employment? Well, first, we learn that the number of jobs created through social economy is huge. When put in, whether it is put in terms of direct employment, and then you talk about staff and workers, or indirect employment, and then we talk about members, associates, or clients of social enterprises. It is just talking for cooperatives, it is estimated that about 9.5% of the population of the world has a job one way or another enabled through cooperatives. In Europe, in the European Union, about 6% of the working population has a job generated through social economy. Of course, those are figures coming from elsewhere, from the established literature. We didn't do that ourselves. We have just our case studies. Aside of the number of jobs, bounce, and now it seems to, yeah. All right, that's better. Apart from the number, we have also the quality of employment, which is an important consequence or significance of social economy. And then we're talking about the working conditions and the employment security, the valuing and improving of people's skills, the income distribution, the participatory management, the work-life balance, and the integration in the local community. Moreover, we see a more than average interest in environmentally friendly activities and in human rights due diligence. Then third significance, social economy somehow functioned as an important facilitator or catalyzer, if you want, for the shift from informal employment to a more formal type of employment. Even when this is a very gradual process, the strong point of social economy in this is that it makes formal work more attractive by giving access to all sorts of services like marketing, financing, improving of skills, by setting minimum standards of decent work, by defending common interests toward government and toward society at large, and providing elementary forms of social protection, especially health insurance. So these are factors which make social economy very significant for work and employment. Still, we also have to be realistic about what social economy is capable of. It is not that it works automatic. It only operates well when certain conditions are fully observed. So social economy initiatives need a legal and institutional framework in the country. They need embedding in the larger movement. And then we think about federations, types of cooperative colleges and apexes. They need to be accepted by the public at large, important. And most of all, they need stable and reliable sources of income, either by their own activities or by support from third parties. Still, in a chapter of being realistic, we also have to be realistic about the abilities of social economy to withstand this disruptive events, such as the present COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, information I picked up recently from the Payoga cooperative in the Philippines, which was one of our cases, told that their economic activities, both the production of organic fertilizer as the thing what they do with livestock, that is goats and chickens, all this has come to a standstill, and this has been leading their members very quickly, immediately into subsistence bonuses. Nevertheless, and despite all the hardships, we know from another study we have carried out formerly in Africa that cooperatives tend to be very tough entities, tough survivors, if you want to know. That a temporary state of dormancy does not withhold them from revitalizing as soon as the economic and political context improves. It's probably an important observation. So when we come back to our macro challenges, these economic, technological, environment, and demographic challenges, we are now better equipped to picture the role of social economy to address them. And other than their direct significance, we have already explained for work and employment. Good practices we've seen allow us to assume that social economy can and will play also an important role in what we call globalization, embedding global activities in local ecosystems. Also an important role in remaining a factor in reversing or at least stabilizing the rural exodus, foreshadowing the network society by promoting both human and social capital. They also serve, of course, as a policy instrument to reach out to vulnerable groups, and they reinvest surpluses created through economic activities back into their community rather than becoming a part of the speculative economy. So while we are optimistic about the role social economy could play, we don't want to romanticize them, as it's also true that many initiatives do fail and lack maybe sometimes proper qualifications or run out of luck. We also plead not to ideologize social economy or see it as a political instrument, but rather estimate the intrinsic value it has on its own. All right, if you want to know more about our case studies, you can download this report and you can contact me anytime for any further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It is much appreciated. I'm not sure if I'm back on screen. Yes, there I am. I just need to get my view right. Thank you very much. And what I need to remind everyone is that for questions and answers, there is a link where you can put your questions where we will put them to the panelists and answer. And so now we've had an excellent opening presentation, which is setting the scene. I'd like to hand over the floor to our second keynote speaker, Ricardo Badini, who's the director of Eurixe. Over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Vic, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen in just a second so you can see the slides. Okay, and I'll dive right in. So, as you have heard from Ignaz's excellent presentation, there is a growing attention being paid to the social and solidarity economy as a possible solution for current and emerging social problems, just like the ones related to the future of work and others as well. And so consequently, there is also a focus on the different ways in which the SSE can be supported and developed. And among these, the issue of finance in particular has been identified as a key lever that can help expand the capacity of social and solidarity economy organizations. And indeed, over the last few years, this notion of social finance or finance for a social purpose or financial tools applied to social and solidarity economy organizations have been gaining a lot of attention and a place of prominence in the public discourse. And this is due to a number of different reasons, and some are more valid than others. One is that the finance clearly is important for SSE organizations as it is for all different types of enterprises. It's also possible that SSE organizations are now operating in sectors of activity that are more capital intensive than the traditional ones. But there's also some kind of preconceived notion maybe that, you know, nonprofit organizations are intrinsically more economically fragile than their for-profit counterparts, which is we know it's not always the case. as well as, if you pass me the term, some rebranding needs on the part of the financial services sector in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, needing to show that they are indeed socially and environmentally responsible. And so there is a lot of different potential factors at play when we think about finance for the social economy, but there's not a whole lot of empirical evidence. And so as Vic said at the beginning, in 2018, the ILO commissioned this project, Eurixe, with support and funding from the government of Luxembourg. And the research question that we were grappling with was what kind of financial resources are in fact available for SSE organizations, for what purpose they're being used or they could be used, and in what ways they can be accessed. And the project was structured in three main phases. The first was developing a somewhat comprehensive overview of all the different sources of financial resources, as well as the different possible mechanisms. The second phase then conducted a series of country case studies around the world with the help of national researchers, and some of them might be here with us today, so I'd like to take the opportunity to thank them for their work, to see what kind of financial mechanisms SSE organizations actually use. And finally, out of this work, we tried to tease out some cross-cutting themes and issues and some overarching implications for the work. And the first hurdle or challenge that the project faced was the difficulty in assessing the demand for finance on the part of SSE organizations. And this is really for two main reasons. One, and kind of we knew this going in, but it reinforced it, there's very little data on SSE organizations, even on basic parameters like how many there are and what they do, let alone what their need and use of finance might be. And so while there's this prevailing discourse that says that SSE organizations are lacking financial resources, the empirical evidence for this is really hard to come by. The second point is that the SSE includes, as we've heard before, a very diverse set of actors. Within the SSE, we find massive cooperative enterprises with billions of dollars in turnover, as well as tiny volunteer community organizations in some remote area. And so the variability of needs for financial resources is, as great as the diversity of organizations within the SSE in terms of the sector of operation, the size of the organization, and also what phase of its life cycle that organization can be. In spite of this, I think we can make some general observations about the specificity of SSE organizations when it comes to finance. The first, and it follows, I think, from some of the things that Ignace was saying earlier, we know SSE organizations engage in the production of goods and services. And so, like all enterprises, they need money to fund their operations. And so financial resources can help SSE organizations much in the same way as they can help any other type of enterprise in covering startup costs or addressing cash flow issues or funding investments that are needed to grow the operation. And so from a conceptual point of view, there's really no reason to believe that the needs of SSE organizations in terms of finance are different from those of any other type of enterprise. At the same time, though, we know that SSE organizations are different from for-profit corporations, and they're different in ways that can impact directly the kind of finance they can access and how they can access it. We know that these organizations are stakeholder-oriented. That means they're geared towards meeting the needs of their stakeholders and not remunerating investors. And also they have democratic and participatory governance structures. And these are things that make it harder for the standard tools of finance, especially equity finance, to be applied to them the same way they're applied to for-profit corporation. And so this is, the first observation I'd like to bring to you today is that the specificity of SSE organizations with respect to finance does not reside in their need for financial resources. It resides in the types of financial resources that are available to them as organizations that are not designed to remunerate investors and maximize return on investment. This puts them at a disadvantage towards certain types of financial mechanisms, but also puts them at an advantage towards other types of financial mechanisms relative to for-profit corporations. And so it's really important to think about what are all the different possible sources of finance, as well as the mechanisms that can be used to access them. And generally, well, we can define a mechanism as a way in which financial resources can be made available by some suppliers. And here we have classified the main suppliers of finance for SSC organizations to the organizations that need them. And these ways can have very different implications in terms of the recovery of capital, the expected rate of return, the way property rights are assigned to the different parties involved. And so when we dive into the main financial mechanisms that are available to SSC organizations, we can see that some are internal to the organization. They basically make available resources from within. These are resources that come from the social base, so maybe the members of the organizations, but also from the management, reinvestment in profits, accumulation of assets over time, and so forth. And then there's a number of mechanisms that are external and bring in resources from outside the organization. And these are grants from philanthropic entities or public sector agencies, and then debt like bank loans, equity, of course, as well as some mixed tools that can combine the characteristics of these other basic types. Then if we want to go beyond these general observations, we need to gather some data on the ground. And the way we've done it is by conducting these case studies in 8 different parts of the world. They're very different from each other. We have the province of Quebec in Canada, we have a case study in Ecuador, in Colombia, Luxembourg, Italy, South Korea, Morocco, and Cape Verde. So really quite a broad cross-section of experiences. And in each of these countries, we went to look at the state of the SSC ecosystem in that country, as well as the main financial mechanisms that are being used. And here's the first result. Not surprising, but the SSC can play very different roles and has very different characteristics in different countries. And in some contexts, it's mostly confined to a remedial role, if you will. So has a strong focus on the contrast of poverty and social inclusion, but it's there to kind of patch things up for the problems that other actors create, if you pass me the term. In other contexts, it plays a more systemic role. So it is in effect just a different way of organizing economic activity across the economic spectrum. So in the first case, we see the action of SSC organizations is being more driven by the public sector and public policy, maybe a little bit less entrepreneurial. In the other case, instead, we see SSC organizations engaging in the plurality of economic activities, taking risks, being entrepreneurial, and also more autonomous from the public sector in terms of their actions and their resources. These differences in SSC ecosystems then have an impact on the issue of finance. And let me pause on the concept of ecosystem for a second. When we talk about ecosystems, we don't talk just about the SSC organizations themselves, but we talk about the connections they make among each other, the legal framework within they operate, the support networks they can establish, the umbrella organizations that can represent their interests. So all of this complex set of actors and relationships in a place. And what we observed is that where these ecosystems are more balanced and complex, then the financial mechanisms that are available to SSC organizations also tend to be more developed. And just to bring an example I'm very familiar with, because it's right here where Eurixe is located, is the Trentino region in Italy. We are here in a region where there's a very strong cooperative sector that's been around for almost 150 years, that over time, within a very supportive legal framework and environment, it's been able to create its own banking system. It's been able to create its own consortia to issue guarantees to SSC organizations, apply for loans with the banks. It has cooperative mutualistic mutual funds that can help fund the startup of new cooperatives or invest in cooperatives that are in trouble and need some support. So there's really is a whole system that's set up just to provide finance to a big, important part of the social and solidarity economy. And conversely, we see that in contexts where these ecosystems are a bit more fragile, then the financial instruments that are available are also much more limited. And in some cases might even be conducive to the growth and the strength of the ecosystem. And one thing we've observed, for instance, is where there is a massive recourse to microcredit. This is often geared to supporting individual micro businesses, and very seldom it can lead to the creation of those collective type of enterprises that really form the bedrock of the social and solidarity economy. What does this mean? It means that it's the quality of the ecosystem that determines the articulation and effectiveness of the financial system available to SSE, and not vice versa. And we often think about it in the reverse, but really this is, I think, is an important point. And then when we look in this context where the ecosystems are well developed to the need and use of finance, we find that by and large, the financial needs of SSE organizations seem to be fairly well satisfied. We don't find evidence of this mismatch between needs and resources available, at least not to a great extent. And also they seem to be satisfied primarily by internal funding sources, as well as the access to more traditional financial instruments like bank loans. And I want to point out in particular the importance of internal funding sources, because these are key for the social economy and for social economy organizations, especially when they are incentivized by legal frameworks, for instance, with provisions like profit distribution constraints and asset locks and tax breaks for reinvesting profits in the enterprise, the institutional mutualistic cooperative fund, and so forth. And these are important because they're consistent with the specificities and values of SSE organizations. They can really ensure a long-term approach to the management of the enterprise. And also, in a way, they help cement a cooperative pact between the members of the organization and also between the organization and its community. And on the other hand, we don't find a lot of use of newly developed financial instruments, unless they are instruments that are set up within the SSE itself. And you can find some examples in the report. I don't have time to get into them here, but like the Fiducie in Quebec, for instance, or CFI in Italy. And you can find descriptions of these in our report. And so speaking toward, about these innovation and new financial instruments, we have found overall a fairly extensive degree of mistrust on the part of SSE actors for the world of impact investment, as in the case of social impact bonds, for instance, that were mentioned earlier, and other impact finance type instruments. By and large, these are not seen as arising from a demand of the sector, the social and solidarity economy sector, but more coming in from the world of, speculative finance. And there's a good example of this, a survey that came out in Italy just a few weeks ago that looked at this relationship of social economy organizations and finance, and it showed that the organizations within the social economy that declare they have a better understanding of the impact finance instruments are also the ones that deem them the least useful. One big issue is, of course, the measurement of social impact, which by and large is still a controversial subject. There is no agreement about its importance. It's very difficult in defining and determining the criteria and indicators to use to properly align the interest of the investors as well as of the organization and the users. And in some cases, it can lead to some unintended consequences, like targeting users that for which the impact is easier to measure and not necessarily the users that are in most need of intervention. The other issue is that often we see in impact finance, the mechanisms, the conditions that are applied are not easily compatible with the needs and characteristics of social and solidarity economy organizations. In terms of the expected returns of investment, they're often quite high, the timing for capital recovery, which is always quite short, as well as the issue of property rights that I was saying earlier. It's a big problem when you have a democratic one head, one vote governance structure. as the title of today's webinar says, and the world we live in, you can't talk about any issue without considering what is the impact of the COVID crisis and what can we expect in its aftermath. This impact, of course, is still unclear. It will take months or years to fully play out, and it's likely to be uneven. We've seen even in these months that the SSC, some parts of the SSC have been impacted dramatically, others have been doing quite well. So the jury's still out, but I think there are at least 3 effects that we can say are very likely to take place, and to an extent they probably are already. The first is an erosion of assets of SSC organizations. We've seen this during the last economic crisis. It's likely to happen again because it's true, these organizations tend to be anti-cyclical. They keep operating during times of economic crisis and recession, but they do so by compressing their margin and cutting into their assets. And so this is probably an issue going forward. The second is a push towards innovation. A lot of these organizations are being pushed to innovate more than in the past, especially around digitalization, which we know is not a strong suit of social economy organizations, but we've seen, and we're here doing a webinar on Zoom, it's clearly become a very pervasive way we do business in general. The third, and probably most important, is that we are likely going to see an expanded role moving forward for these organizations, because public sector is going to have even more constraints. It's going to be even more constrained by public debt going forward. And at the same time, social needs are going to be increasing. We heard Vic talk about expected job loss of 500+ million. So we know the needs are going to grow bigger. And so the role of the SSC is likely to have to be bigger as well. All of these trends basically point to an increased importance of financial resources, even more than in the past, and particularly resources that are geared towards strengthening the capitalization of social and solidarity economy organizations and enable them to find new investment. So if we combine these observations with the fact that already we had seen SSC organizations engaging in sectors that are more capital intensive, like healthcare, for instance, or urban renewal, or management of facilities of various kinds, we can expect that the need for financial resources and the scale of the interventions is going to increase. And so we think it's critical that going forward, we keep devising ways to make these financial resources available, but in a way that is consistent with the specificities and the needs of SSC organization. So I'm going to wrap it up here and look forward to the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Once again, Ricardo and Ignacio, this has been a great introduction to our discussion from the panel, which comes on and leads on now. I'm now going to move straight on to the 3 discussants who are going to be addressing some of the points that have been raised. The first is going to be Ms. Maud Brossard, the Director of Associate Life and Consultation, Chantier de l'Est in Quebec in Canada, followed by Silvana Capuccio, Senior Officer in the Department of International Politics from the Italian General Confederation of Labor in Italy, and lastly, Mr. Carlos Lozano, Coordinator of International Affairs, the Spanish Business Confederation of the Social Economy in Spain. So we've got a great lineup, and thank you for the two opening key addresses, which have really set the scene for a good question and answer session and for the discussants. The question I'm going to ask is, how can the SSE contribute to the maintenance and the creation of decent work? I think this is a very key factor with the value system that the SSE brings to the table, and what is needed from policymakers as we go forward. The policymakers are key in providing the regulatory framework and setting up the scene. So I'm going to first ask Maud to take the floor, and then I will introduce Silvana thereafter. So Maud, hopefully you're there. The floor is yours.
Hi everyone. Bonjour. My first language is French, so sorry if sometimes my English is not perfect, but I'm really happy to be with you for us this morning. So I will share my presentation. So Thank you for the invitation. So yeah, we will talk so how we leave the crisis here, and how we try to explain to our politician and population the part of social economy in those time of crisis. So here to start, it's an image that we would like to share, that the three pillars for a balanced economy is a public sector, private sector, and social economy. And in those times, it's really important for us to talk about this balance, because we have a lot of crises here regarding the elders population, so around essential services. So it's important to talk about this balance and how non-profit it's important in essential services. So it's the image that we share. And just to situate you, in Quebec we are about 8 million people, and we have around 11,000 social enterprises. And the interesting part is our studies prove that the survival rate is after 5 years compared to traditional enterprise, it's higher, so 35% higher. 30% higher. So this impact, it proved also that it's a long-term strategy to choose social economy for essential need jobs and long-term jobs. And in yellow, this is our rural region, and we see that the number of enterprise is really high in rural regions. So again, it's a good argument for us to say that to create jobs in a rural area, it's important to put the social economy as a strategy. Because I don't have a lot of time, I will just talk right now about about our campaign that we made this summer. It was Let's Dare Solidarity Again, because at the beginning of the 90s, the social economy history in Quebec was about solidarity and how to find solution. Economic solution, because in the beginning of the 90s we were in an economic crisis. But again, with this health crisis, it's important to Let's Dare Solidarity Again. So it was our campaign. We had 6 thematics. So the first one was Let's Dare Decent Quality of Life for all. So when I was talking about the elders population crisis, we were a lot talking about essential services with our government and the role of social economy. Also, Let's Dare collective real estate again, so ownership of the collective real estate. We had also Let's Dare to buy local. I imagine it's the same in your country. And Let's Dare food security and food sovereignty. Another one was this one. And also Let's Dare the ecological transition. And finally, Let's Dare just recognition of work. And this one was important in the crisis, because we see that in a lot of essential sector that the job was not really valorized. So we need those essential jobs for our services, essential services. So it was a crisis of job at the same time of a crisis of essential services. So our recommendation to our government was to putting like, as Mr. Bodini said, financial support measure for enterprises for the improvement fairness of workers' condition, essentially. And the problem was the equity between organization of the public sector and the social economy. So how can we create decent job in all sectors, not just in the public sector? And we see that the public sector had to improve itself too. So it was the main subject with the government. So implement specific strategy for attracting, maintaining employment too for a sector weakened by the impact of the current crisis, like a health sector. So also, as well as the financial support, the important was to integrate the integration of vulnerable population to avoid creating long-term employment. Also, another strategy was the buyout. So when the workers buy a company for sale by their owner, and organizational models in order to ensure decent living condition for work, as a workers' cooperative and other strategy like that. More or less, it was our campaign. Just to remind what we are the chantier de l'économie sociale. So we bring together all promoter and development together actor to promote and develop the social economy, And for example, we will do several conferences in January around those thematic to make a dialogue with the government on those issues that I just present. And so the important is for the communities to enable constructive strategizing and collective movement building. So it's what we are trying to do with our networks and territories network, sectoral networks, and social movement. So step by step, with our financial tools that we have here in Quebec, we try to finance a project to create job in rural sectors, but also in urban area. So I wish that we will continue that way, and we will promote more the strategy of social economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maud, for that presentation. And as you can see, there's a lot of information and good practices and examples of what can be done in the world of the social and solidarity economy. I'm now going to ask Silvana Capuccio, Senior Officer in the Department of International Politics from the Italian General Confederation of Labour, Italy, to take the floor. Silvana, are you there?
Thank you, Vic, and thank you all for this interesting debate. Well, I think that we are discussing about very needed and very actual items. Indeed, it is very difficult to understand what will be the output of we could say of the health emergency. So how will be the labor world after the pandemic? What is for sure that is that today we can begin to take some first lessons. And one of these is that the role of the state is central, is essential, that the public action is strongly needed, especially in some fields, like the universal access to the health protection and the recognition of the health protection as a common good. So here it is extremely important, the role of the communities and the civil society in addressing also this. We have seen that there were emerging gaps given by the constraints, given due the cuttings made in the last years, and we have seen a fundamental role already played by the social solidarity economy organizations. So We have seen this, for instance, in Italy, but not only here, by countering the job losses. So lowering the unemployment, reducing the poverty, and reducing the social inequalities, as this is one of the main challenge we have still to face. And also as the social solidarity economy organizations can respond by looking at the specific needs in the community, locally for certain groups and in a specific context. For instance, looking at the age. My country is one of the countries having the highest expectancy life, together with Japan. So here it is very important to ensure assistance and healthcare to the people all along their life. Here in the context of the COVID-19, and here I am looking at the, while we are in the middle of this crisis, so I am not only looking at what will be the future, but also at today, we need for local medicine to the response in terms of the protection, assistance, and obviously in terms of prevention. Also, if we look at how this organization could help to respond to the crisis we had 12 years ago, so I'm looking at the 2008 crisis, we see that the performances which were given by the by these organizations were much better than those of the we could say the market companies, the traditional companies did. What is important, just to avoid to celebrate, because it's right, and I share the opinion of the previous speakers of Mr. Paulet and Bodini, is that we cannot accept the idea of the social and solidarity economy organization in itself as something to be celebrated, but it should respond to precise characterization. And it's important that one of the most is that the creation of jobs is not whatever, but it's quality jobs. And what is important is that they respond to the application of the national collective bargaining. So the creation of decent work is such as there is also the respect of what is agreed at the national level by the normal bargaining amongst the social players, so between the employers and trade union organizations. Then, well, I think that looking always at this at these organizations, it's important to underline the fact that they respond to different needs. So we have the personal services, but we have also less traditional, but which are emerging in terms of, for instance, the organic farms, the new types, or we could say authentic types of food safety, and they can allow to look into the chain of production, looking at the quality, always meaning quality made of production, safe and green production, together with the respect of the labor rights of the people who work there. The demand to the public authorities, what we must expect and we must claim for from the public authorities. First, it is to consider always the context given by the ILO recommendation, which are extremely important on this. I'm thinking about the 193, but also the 204 and the 198, because they underline and they highlight the need of generating public policies and make the reference to the implementation, to the respect of the fundamental labor rights. So this context, this frame is a really needed one. Then we have to ensure, and we have to insist from now and on more and more on ensuring the support for this organization as key stakeholders of the society. Saying that, we need the public system to deserve more attention in terms of studies, in terms of economic policy, and so also allocating the adequate resources, as it was also already underlined, but always in connection with the respect of the rule of law where these organizations operate. Still, I look at the clock, so I shall try to sum up, because there are many things that we could ask the public system to, but one of these is also the inclusion of education, of training on the social economy in some curricula of the education, of the educational structure. And also to make more research, especially today, on how this organization can face some very sad emerging trends which are xenophobic and which exclude large part of the population, the most vulnerable. At the opposite, the social and solidarity economy organizations can really help and operate in terms of including and providing assistance and integration, for instance, to migrants, refugees. In Italy, we have a larger experience in this field, which is essential. Really, we are here in the context of the ILO. These are absolutely essential in a context of social justice and development and future of work. So I stop here because of the timing, but I thank you again for providing such possibility and occasion to talk about it.
Thank you very much, Silvana. Without any further ado, I'm going to ask Carlos to come in. As the business coordinator of international affairs from CEPES in Spain. So thank you, Silvana. That was great. And Carlos, the floor is yours.
So, well, first of all, thank you very much to the International Labour Organization to invite CEPES. CEPES is the organization, national organization representing the social economy in Spain. First of all, and also I think I'm very proud to speak after all these speakers, because most of them, I said what I'm going just to reinforce. I'm happy also to send a message to the world, a positive message in these difficult times. I'm happy also to see all people around the world interested in social economy. So very, very quickly, I just wanted to explain to you that CEPES is this national organization is the voice of the social economy in front of authorities, government, European institutions, to defend the common interests of social economy. Social economy in Spain is a very strong actor for employment. Our main role, our main recognition by institutions, by government, is because we create and maintain jobs, and jobs of quality, because 80% of jobs in social economy in Spain are full-term, and also long-term jobs. So this is why we are involved, social economy is involved in all areas concerning job creation, entrepreneurship, and also social cohesion. I'm talking about an actor because we consider ourselves as a key partner for solving main challenges of the situation, especially right now. We are talking about 10% of Spanish GDP. We are talking about 12% of working population involved in social economy. 2 million people are working on social economy, direct and indirect jobs. So CEPES is the voice of all the people and is involved in policies promoting quality jobs. And we are talking about half of the population, half of the labor force in social economy are women. I'm very proud of that. We are very proud of that, and because we are contributing at the same time to a more equal society, because we are also involved in promoting employment for disabled people and for vulnerable people who are not able to get into the labor market. And CEPES are the same, well, I'm just talking about the official data provided by the administration, by the institution in charge of statistics. But at the same time, CEPES has launched several initiatives just to make more visible the impact of social economy. And last year, we were lucky, we had the opportunity just to present a research on the contribution of, just to measure the impact of social economy to a more inclusive and more sustainable development in terms of social and territorial cohesion. And we wanted just to measure the impact of our values and principles. Is this a research just comparing a number of social economy enterprises, they behave in front of other companies in the market. And we had the opportunity just to show and to validate that we are more involved, we contribute in a more extent to create decent jobs. At the same time, people involved in social economy are sometimes not able to access to the labor market. We are talking about people over 55 years old, women, people with disabilities, and also something like we said before, is a long-term job, but also stability. We reduce the wage gap in this period is very, very important. We also promote diversity, leadership of women, leadership of other excluded collectives. And of course, we are also very active in Spain in the promotion of rural areas, because most of the social economy are active in small towns, and we contribute in a very important part, in a very important way, to keep people in the rural areas, in the local areas, which are a very important part of our activity. So if we should compare the situation with other companies, we realize that, for instance, if social economy was not there, a lot of people, we are talking about 200,000 people, were not in the labor market. They were excluded of the labor market. And at the same time, a lot of jobs, 55,000 jobs in rural areas would disappear. But since we have a very short time, I just wanted to add something very important. Social economy is present in all sectors. And after the COVID, in the Corona, in the beginning of this year, some of the social economy enterprises, they had a very negative impact because they were in the sectors very affected by the crisis. Of course, we were in front of the just taking a very important role, playing a very important role in strategic sectors like the food distribution or social services, health as well. But at the same time, there were also sectors where social economy was very affected by the crisis. So I'm talking about services, education, commercial activities. So CEPES as main interlocutor with the government, we have a very active role just to defend and to promote social economy in the measures adopted by the government to defend and to assure the continuity of all kind of businesses and social actors. So we had the opportunity just to defend, and also at the same time we are lucky because from the beginning of this year, the new government, they decided to adopt a new ministry for labor, at the same time for social economy. So it was a very important recognition of the role of social economy in Spain and of course in other countries. So we had this opportunity to discuss with the government and to assure that social economy is included in all the measures adopted by the government to promote and to prevail any harm from the action of the COVID. So, and for instance, just one data which is very positive for social economies. During this period, the government has adopted what we call ERTES, that means a kind of transition period schemes to support companies that they were not active during the crisis, the temporary unemployment schemes, to help them to pass all this crisis for a time. So some social economic enterprises had the opportunity to claim for this support. It was a temporary use for these companies. So 80% of the companies in social economy, all the 80% of the social enterprises who claim, who adopted and who used this support, this financial support during this transition period, were able just to recover the activity and at the same time to recover all the jobs, to save all these jobs and to get people on board again. So we still have 20% to get into the normal situation, but I think it's a good signal for all the administrations and for all the society to explain that social economy is able and capable to help to maintain all these jobs. And I stop here because I knew that I have a very short time. And thank you for your time and for your listening.
Thank you very much, Carlos. So now we've got the scene set from all our presenters and panelists. We've got a number of questions, but I'm going to pose, there's one question that was addressed by Andrew Cummings to Ignacio, but he's already answered that in the chat column. And I'll come back to that question if we have time. But I'd like to go to a question from Lavan Kumar to all the panelists, and I'd like you just to give a brief response to these questions. The first one is, how do we aid the unorganized sector and non-registered labor components in order to support them financially? And he's referring in particular to a big country like India. So I'll repeat the question and ask Ignacio to come in first. How to aid the unorganized sector, non-registered labor, in order to support them financially? Ignacio, can we ask you to come in first, and then I'll go to Ricardo, Maud, Silvana, and Carlos in that order. Ignacio, are you there?
Yes, okay, you hear me?
Right.
Yeah, I've seen that question. Of course, it's a very big question. At the same time, I think I've explained a bit that setting up social economy initiatives, if you put it in mechanic or in power mechanic terms, you don't drive on automatic gear. You drive on manual gear, and it takes a lot of inventiveness and a lot of sweat and blood and tears, if you want. It's not an easy job. Then, if you speak especially about specific groups and you speak about informal workers there, I think the big work is up front. It's from the time you have this ID, the big work is to reach out to those groups and to create sufficient critical mass, if to say that it is worth to invest in it, invest time, invest energy, and also invest money in it. And also, and of course, at the same time, you have to reach out to investors and to supporters, and then you have to look at well, at governmental circles, but also to maybe donors or to the more established social economy actors in the country. I think in India there's one big example, and it was not in our study, but there's an organization called SIWA, and that's self-employed women, and what the A is for, yeah, I don't know exactly, but self-employed women's organization, which has started very small and has grown very, very big. And the initiative takers in for this this initiative always has to come from somewhere, and very often you see that it comes from some spontaneous social actors, NGOs or the church or other actors, and they've seen that the enthusiasm for it immediately was very high. So you have a very committed public there. But it takes skills, it takes endurance, it takes management to get it going. So that's all I can answer to it.
Thank you, Ricardo. Your comments?
It is very, very briefly. I think I agree with everything Ignace said. We know that social economy organizations can provide a sort of, let's call it an employment infrastructure that can help transition from informal to formal work. There's a lot of really good examples. The one in India, there's some good example in Central and South America of this. It's a difficult process, and like most social economy initiatives, it works when it's, at least in some important ways, a bottom-up phenomena. And so really working with the people, developing a mutual level of trust is important. It's important to identify wherever there's some kernel of initiative on the ground to really work with that and help it grow organically from the bottom up. I'd say that's a very important ingredient.
Thank you. Maud, your comments?
The example that I have is it's in childcare here in Quebec, that the women were in separate non-recognized work, and we made a big network of social economy childcare, the non-profit, to improve the quality of childcare and to put those women together in childcare center, non-profit childcare sector, with the formation to those women. And now it's a big network in Quebec, and all the Canada is taking this example for non-profit childcare. So I think for those women, it was a great way to make a recognized formation to integrate decent work and in the union forces that help them to be in the labor market. So
thank you. And Silvana, your comments, please.
Yes, thank you. This is a key question. And again, I would like to recall the rule of law, fundamental role. In India, we talk on how to transform the unorganized sector in organized sector. My organization is in very close contact with the SIWA, with the Self-Employed Women Association, and we work with them really closely since many, many years. And we are aware that there is, in India, there is now a sort of labor law reform which puts under attack the already weak labor rights, and which is putting the conditions of the people, of the workers, back of years, of decades. So again, if we do not ensure if we do not ensure the population to have freedom of association recognized as a precondition for all the other rights, so the right of having collective bargaining, and to eliminate the child labor, the forced labor, to fight against the different forms of discrimination, it is impossible really to create decent work conditions. It's absolutely impossible. And we must recognize that this COVID emergency, unfortunately, is creating a wonderful occasion for those forces in the market who want to put the rights back, the workers' rights back, human and labor rights back. Is creating a wonderful occasion, and not everybody is still enough talking about it, but it is the absolute reality. The multilateral system is showing it, and the real, concrete, daily conditions of workers, and especially of women, of course, is showing it. If we look at the situation of migrants, for instance, I come back again to India, no, where the migration, the internal migration is big, and it has exacerbating the difficult living and working conditions of the migrant inside the country. But it is especially because of it, of the lack of the rule implementations and of the control on what are the implementation of the conventions and the international labor standards.
Thank you very much, Silvana. Carlos, your comments?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very good question, and it's very important just to explain them. In less and more developed countries, social economy is offering good tools to solve these kind of problems, and especially in Spain, for instance, I remember many cases of informal workers that transformed themselves into a cooperative, and to use the cooperative not only to get a job, not only to get finance, and also social protection, because at the same time, it's like Silvana remember us. It's very important just to have this decent job, to get into normal conditions. So it's very difficult. I know that it's not only happening in Spain or in other southern Mediterranean countries or in Europe, and also it's using this formula in less developed countries. And social economy, and in particular cooperatives, is the answer sometimes just to formalize this informal job. And also to get this social protection needed to achieve a life, and to get education, and to organize social civil society itself, and to protect the access to social protection at the same time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go on to the next question, and I'm going to reverse the order. So Carlos, if you can come in first to answer this question, and we'll go then to Silvana, Maud, Ricardo, and then Ignacio. This is about strategic partnerships. And there's a question about what the panelists think of the importance of strategic partnerships. And I'm no doubt they're going to be all saying yes. But the second part of the question is, who would you consider as the big potential partners for the SSE and these organizations, and how can they get to scale? Because one of the challenges we've got is that we've got these pockets of excellence, but we're not getting these big strategic partnerships, and we're not getting to scale. So Carlos, the floor is yours.
Okay. Since I'm representing here an institutional organizations, first of all, I'm always happy to speak to the international labor organizations, because we are speaking at the same time to three pillars of the social dialogue. First of all, the public administration, the governments, of course, the trade unions, and the professional organizations, the business organizations. So for me, it's a step forward for social economy to be recognized and to be inside the agenda of the International Labour Organization. And in our case, in Spain, we are fighting very much to be recognized as a social partner. Okay, it's not like we have to be in the collective garden, and we are not going to be there. This is not the point. But we want to be part of the main discussions concerning the social and economic development in well, in our country, and of course in main policies. Also the SDGs are very important, and to be involved in this huge agenda is a very important part for social economy. Has a voice and has many things to say about, and to create partnership with trade unions, business organizations, international organizations at the same time, and especially with governments in our case. So I think we should have a very active role to make ourselves very active and very visible.
Thank you very much. Silvana, your take on partnerships and who the partner should be?
Yes, about the partnership, I think that even being open, we must be very careful, because to be very frank, when I listen the adjective innovative, I warn a bit, because sometimes we lose the exact borders of what is. So it depends on what we are dealing with. I take one easy example of these days. If we discuss about the protection of health, obviously the aim of the private is very different than that of the public. And in Italy, we have paid for this. We have seen that in the regions where there were the massive cuttings on the public health system, there was a massive impact also of the virus. So I want to mean, when the partnership are chosen, we must be very clear on what are the border of the operational activities and input of the different actors. And we must be sure that the real aims are respected. Coming back to the health, if we want to guarantee the universal free access to the medicine, as it must be for everybody, so we cannot put this in the hands of the private only. It must, we must ensure the state to have its recognized role, and so on with the different examples so you can choose.
Thank you very much, Maud.
I agree with Mrs. Cappuccio. So I think they resume what I was thinking about.
Okay, thank you. We can move on to Ricardo.
Yeah, I think Carlos already listed a lot of the institutions and obvious partners, I was thinking about as well. I'd like to say this. To me, the key challenge when we think about partnerships in advancing the role and scope of the SSC today is breaking out of this notion that somehow the SSC is there just to remedy social problems. Okay, so we really need to start thinking about the SSC as an alternative way to organize our economies and our societies across the board. And so any institution, any actor that can help us advance that point, I think is a strategic partner for the SSC. And that starts with the UN all the way down to local governments. I would say that is, to me at least, maybe the key point that we need to raise. Thank you.
Thank you. Ignacio?
Yeah, well, yeah, just had a bit of time to think about your question. Of course, it's true that social economy has to break out of its own circle, and they need partners. And then you spontaneously think of governmental partners or businesses or whatever. I think the first partner they should look at is the media. when we did a study on African cooperatives that was done back in 2006 or so, like the key point in weaknesses of African cooperatives there was their lack of visibility. And I think that's still true, and it's also true for SSE in general. They're not well recognized, they are not well known. And I think in this age, the effort to become known is not as large as it used to be. I think that we have now social media all over the world, and social media is a very dynamic entity, if you could say, because everybody wants to be an author and has something interesting to tell, and social media is also feeding mass media. So if you look at the news or you listen to the news, that I think 75% of what comes into the news comes from the social media. It's some opinion or something happening that is fed by the social media. So I think if social economy gets more visibility and gets a better place in the media at large, and raises an interest, other partners will come in almost automatically. That may be the government, that may be also businesses, and businesses should not be considered as a sort of an enemy. Slowly, this idea of social corporate responsibility, it sounds, if I use this term now, it sounds very old, but it is gradually, you still can see that it is more and more becoming a sort of a normal, and people are watching it also. People are watching the big companies, people are watching the multinationals, and they will become more and more under sort of a pressure to take up their responsibility. And if they can do it in partnership with other organizations like social economy organizations, I think it's a sort of a match, but of course it's also a process. It takes time. So my answer is media.
Thank you very much, and I think that's a very apt comment on which to end our session today. You know, the thing that we always talk about is that the SSE environment is one that is certainly enabled or able to deliver on the social deficit and the challenges that we found ourselves in with COVID. But the branding of SSE, the knowledge sharing, the platforms from which we work from, the partnerships that we need, we're going to have to be very creative in our thinking and not get caught up in these silos that we often don't want to open up to allow other kinds of discussion and other players to join hands with the social economy. So I think this is a space that we certainly can pick up as we go ahead. I want to say a big thank you to our speakers, Ignace, Ricardo, Maud, Silvana, and Carlos. It's great having you, and it was an excellent round of presentation. So thank you very much. To the ILO team that organized this, to Valentina, to Susan, and under the guiding hand of Simel and Guy Chami and the rest of them, thank you very much. And we look forward to interacting with all of you. And sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions, but our time is up. And we appreciate all of you who signed in to be part of this discussion group. The social media has opened up to amazing webinars now. And instead of having a few participants, we can have hundreds of participants signing in from across the world. So those of you who are going to bed now, good night. Those who are waking up, good morning. And those in the midday, have a good lunch. So thank you to all of you. And we're going to sign off now and wish you all well. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.